Well, hello again, friends, and welcome to another episode of Willis Wit and Wisdom. My name is Eric Willis, and along with me I have,
Bob Willis.
and we actually claim each other as family, depending on the day.
Yep.
But
We
what's
have
been,
papers to prove that.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Hey, Dad, what's been keeping you sane and keeping you going during this
Mm,
pandemic and
right.
lockdown?
It is a lockdown. I've been focusing on writing and just writing a book, having it published, should have it in a couple of weeks actually, one for caregivers. And so I've been doing that, been doing some sculpture work, and I'll talk about it in another session. I have some sculpture I'd like to show and share the meaning behind those sculptures. So I've been doing some in-house stuff. I don't want to get out.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you're staying in and taking care of your health and yourself and staying
Hmm.
away from people. That's
Yes.
important. So yeah, we've been doing the same. We're locked down. Every once in a while, we'll get out and get groceries. We'll go on a walk every once in a while. Uh,
Mhm.
we're preparing as a family to go on a hike to Colorado. Hopefully, things will stay open where we can make that trek. But
Right.
so we're just trying to get ready for that. So getting outside and walking around has helped uh,
Hmm.
get
Yep, and
rid of
that's
some of the fog.
exactly, and that's part of my rehab anyway from a little heart issue I had a couple of months ago. Was trying to get that daily exercise in, pushing it just a
Mhm.
little bit every day, and eventually I'll get there.
Good, good. You're no longer bench pressing 500 pounds, but you've
Not anymore. Not
cut back a
anymore.
little bit. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Good, good.
Mm.
Well, obviously, the purpose for our little time together is to infuse a little bit of hope for folks who have questions about life and loss, leadership, and conflict. Pretty much what life is all about, right?
That's right.
So there was a question that came in, wanted to run it by you. And it's from an individual who says, I'm going to visit a friend whose husband died. What do I say?
Mm. That keeps a lot of people away from that setting because they don't know what to say.
Right.
Actually, I can break it down into two words. Two words. When you approach that person and sit with them, you get as close as allowed to them and you look at them and say, what happened? Then you
Mm,
can close your mouth and open your ears and let them tell what happened. Because grievers want to talk and they need to talk. Is that they rarely find someone who will sit in front of them and say, what happened? Tell me about it. And that's another way of coming across with saying, tell me what happened. I want to
mhm.
know it. Okay, I'm here for you. And let them talk about feelings and encourage them to use the feeling words to talk about their sadness and their emptiness.
Mm,
And in fact, you could even lead further in that conversation and you could say, I've known your husband and I knew him, but how would you describe him to someone who had never met him? What words
mm,
would you use to describe him? And
mm.
let them talk about those and those feeling words and the memories they have. And talk about good memories and memories that make them laugh and the memories that make them cry. And that's life. But
Yeah,
one of the main things is pull ourselves up in front of them in a little private setting and say, what happened? Tell
yeah.
me about it. And let them pull back those details.
Yeah, that's good. And there are actually two kind of avenues that a conversation like that could go. One is tell me what happened, which speaks to the events
Mhm.
that took the individual's life. But
Mhm.
then another avenue of uh, tell me what you remember about him. And so
Right.
can you speak to those two different dynamics of, one is more event related, the other is more relational.
Right. In fact, there's a term that we can use is how does this make you feel? And let them think in terms of feeling that it's okay to talk about, it makes me angry or I feel like
Mhm.
I've been abandoned. Let them talk about those feeling things because if we can get into that level with someone, that's when we're not just listening to them, but we're hearing them. We listen with our ears, you're here with your heart. And so we can get in front of that person. By the way, you cannot spell the word heart until you spell the word here first.
Mm,
So we'll get into that person, let them know that it's okay to talk about those feelings with me, but it's all right to ask them, how does this make you feel? Let them
yeah.
talk about the feelings that they have. That's when it gets away from just facts and figures and gets right down to, I haven't told anybody this, but this is what it makes me mad. I'm angry at God. Let them talk about those things, because the more they talk about their grief, it becomes mourning. They're expressing it. And so that's when they find comfort. It's when they mourn.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that outward expression of that inward grief that they
Exactly.
feel.
Yeah.
That's good. One of the questions that I enjoy asking folks who have experienced a loss, and especially with, as a pastor, we find ourselves in the living rooms in the homes of individuals that have lost loved ones that we didn't really know that well or that personally. And so one of the questions I enjoy asking, and anyone can ask these questions, is if they hear someone or have an acquaintance that has lost somebody. But I love to say, can you paint a picture for me of who this person was?
Right.
And just put it in artful type of terms where they're using expressive language and feeling words, and get to the point, like you said, where they're expressing that grief. It becomes mourning, and they're able to put it into words.
Right. And in fact, that's what Jesus said in Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn. They shall be comforted. So as people talk about the feeling words, that's when they'll find comfort. That's the difference between grief and mourning. Grief's on the inside, mourning is when it's expressed. So we're guiding them to talk about feelings. And having them paint a picture takes them from the head level to the heart level, I believe, and talk about the feelings and be able to describe that person in ways that maybe no one has time for.
Yeah. And so people may be a little anxious and concerned about stepping into an environment where someone's grieving and mourning, because they don't want to say something stupid or say the wrong thing or offend, or they're just at a loss for words.
Right.
And so what I hear you saying is presence. You being there speaks volumes. So you don't have to speak in volumes, but simply ask a question and listen.
Right. And don't worry about mentioning the name of the person who died, okay? It's quite all right to use their name because their name didn't die. It's okay to use that name. We could walk out across a lumber yard and see a block of granite. It means nothing at all. But you etch in the name of a person who died and put the date of their birth and date of their death, all of a sudden that block of granite has value because names don't die. So it's okay to talk about the name of that person, talk about memories, because when you bring up that person's name, you're not reminding the griever that the person died. You're reminding them that they lived.
Yes.
That is the key. Let them talk about those living memories.
And that sparks another question in my mind, as I've kind of walked people through this concept of present tense versus past tense, and mentioning the loved one who has passed. And so, what's been your experience as people struggle with using their loved one's name in the past tense?
Yeah, that's the thing. I want them to understand that person's still within them, because we lose people physically. That's the part we lose. That's the past part. But emotionally, they're still part of us. And spiritually, we haven't lost them either. So that's why I want to talk about the emotional part, because that is the part that sneaks up on them. It may be seeing food on a shelf in a grocery store that bring back the memory. That person's still with them. So I think it's important to talk about, you could have past events that you experienced with them, and they were good memories, but let's talk about the things that are going on right now. What is it that triggers a memory for you now? Let them know it's okay. It's quite normal, because we never lose anyone. They're still part of us emotionally, so it's okay to talk about them. Let's talk on that level.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. And so oftentimes when people talk, they're concerned that they will say something wrong, and many of us have been possibly hurt by words that have been said.
But I'm reminded of something I did even in high school when I had a teacher's husband who died. I remember writing a card to that teacher and saying, God chose another angel, and giving her that card. And I look back and I think, oh man, I should have just visited with her, let her tell me about him, because maybe he wasn't an angel.
Yeah.
She knew, okay? But one of the things that we can do is just let that other person do the talking, instead of us saying things like they're in a better place. And because for that griever at that moment, that is not a better place for them. They would like their loved one with them, realizing there is an eternity in heaven we'll have as believers. And yes, it is a better place. But right now for that griever, it doesn't feel better to them. They would feel better if they were holding on to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the immediacy of a loss, a lot of people say, why did this happen? Why? And, we may have the answer to why. We could give them the timeline of events that took their lives, or we may even know, uh, theologically why this happened, the fall of
Mhm.
man and the world that we live in. But those aren't the answers to be
Right,
giving in response to the question why in the immediacy of grief. What are your
right.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the best things we can do is agree with the person. I don't know why. Only God knows why. And soon God tells me, I'll tell you, but I don't understand it. That's especially true when I'm talking with someone who has a death of a child or a baby. I tell them,
Mm,
I don't understand this. I do not know why. Okay. So I join you in that walk. I'll walk with you in that struggle of trying to find why, because I don't have the answers. And it's okay to admit we do not have the answers. I
mm.
believe that there was a man who hung on a cross to ask why. He didn't get any answers either. So it's okay for us to ask why, as long as we don't expect another person to give us an answer, because that isn't going to be possible.
That's a good word. Good word. So hopefully this has been encouraging and helpful for someone today. Um, and you may be an individual who has said something stupid or dumb or regretful in light of a grieving moment of a friend or a family member. What do you do, Dad, when you've said something that you wish you could take back? That
Mhm.
analogy of toothpaste. Whatever you've said is already out of the tube. You can't put it back
It's out.
in. So
Right.
how do you what do you do with
Go
that?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead and approach that person in a private setting, whether you write it or whether you speak to them and say, listen, I spoke the wrong words and I realize I did. I didn't mean to hurt you with what I said. When I said, like you should be over this by now, I wasn't thinking, I wasn't putting myself in your shoes. And so I apologize to you for that. So I ask you forgive me. I have no idea what you've gone through. Okay. So I want to let you teach me about your grief. Okay. So
Mm,
go ahead and admit when we're wrong.
yeah.
Do you have a question I can ask you?
Uh,
Hmm?
yeah, some of the things um, that I get asked oftentimes have to do with what happens when someone says something hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you keep that from being bitterness? When
Mm,
somebody says something that hurts you, how do you keep that from becoming bitter within you?
yeah. Oftentimes we're so self-absorbed, meaning that whatever we're going through in life is right here in front of us, and so it's hard for us to pull back and see what it looks like to put ourselves in other people's shoes and to pause long enough to realize that everyone has a story, and whoever is saying something to me is filtering that through their own life story and experience.
Hmm.
And so as they say something that has hurt me, how do I keep that from becoming a root of bitterness in my heart?
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to give I'm going to give the advice that all of us as children were taught. At least I hope you were taught this at some point in your life: is that if your clothes were to ever catch on fire, what are you supposed to do? You remember the advice?
Supposed to drop and roll.
Absolutely. Stop what you're doing, drop and roll. So stop, drop, and roll is what I want you to remember as you're engaging someone who has offended you or hurt you with their words or actions. Stop the thoughts, drop the assumptions, and roll into action. What I mean by that is, in order to keep something from becoming bitterness in your heart, you need to stop the thoughts that you're thinking about the other person's motives and not trying to assume that you know why they said what they said or did what they did. But then rolling into action requires you to pause long enough to really consider and think through what was the person's intent, what might they why were they motivated to say what they said or do what they did. When you think about reframing it in a positive sense, specifically related to grief, when someone says something, uh, you know, heaven has another angel today, what was the intent behind that? The intent was to comfort, to to let them know that you love them, you care about them, but how it came across, what was said, could land differently. And so your intention didn't meet, or your communication did not meet your intention.
Mhm.
And so stop the thoughts, drop the assumptions, and roll into action. And that action piece is asking questions, being present. Clarify and define are my two favorite words.
Yeah, good words.
So, so to keep it from becoming bitterness in you, pause, stop, drop, and roll. Stop the thoughts, drop the assumptions, and roll into action by asking clarifying and defining questions of the individual.
Good ones, good words. Yeah, I really like that part about clarifying, just to make sure we hear them right. And with someone, especially if they're describing things that went on after a person died, you might even ask them, help me understand a little bit more about that. Okay, you talked about such and such. Let me hear, what did you really mean about it? Let them clarify it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and in a grieving situation, it seems like we talk out of both sides of our mouths and we don't make sense. And it seems like the mind just kind of plays tricks on us. And so we'll say one thing 1 minute and the next minute we'll say something different that contradicts
Right.
it. And so what's going on in our brains? What's happening in that moment, where it seems like we're just not making sense to ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like someone has unscrewed the top of our head and poured in a gallon of molasses, put the lid back on, because our thought process slows down and our concentration has gone away. We can't focus on things, and we're in a survival mode, and it's hard to do things constructively when you're in a survival mode.
Yes, yes. And so come alongside people when they're in survival mode, not with a bunch of words, not with a bunch of advice, but just be there. Your
Yeah.
presence helps, and just ask them to share their story,
Mm-hmm.
and to share stories of their loved one
Yeah.
that they've lost. And if you are in a situation where someone has said something to you that's hurtful, or has offended you, be sensitive to the other person's story, because they're presenting, um, through a filter of their own. And stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
All right, Dad, any last words? We're coming to the end of episode number 3 of Willis Wit and Wisdom.
Wow, you think we'll get some wit and wisdom someday?
I'm looking
Really?
around for it.
Oh,
It might show up.
I'll order some.
Yeah, do that. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. And of course, you can find Dad on Facebook at Bob Willis, and you can find me on Facebook at Reclaim Leaders. And we look forward to answering your questions. So email your questions to us, and we'll be happy to get back to you. God bless you, and thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye, folks.